Hi, everyone. So, as mentioned before, my name is Sari Aziz. I'm originally from Indonesia. I'm currently working in The Hague for an international court called the Mechanism for International Criminal Tribunals. For those of you who haven't heard about the court, it's basically an international court created by the United Nations to continue the functions of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, or the ICTY and the ICTR as we call it. The ICTR and the ICTR are courts that was established by the United Nations Security Council with a mandate to investigate and prosecute those individuals, most senior leaders and those most responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide that happened during the war in the former Yugoslavia and the conflict that happened in Rwanda during the 90s. Before I start my talk, I'm obliged to clarify that I speak here on behalf of my personal capacity and not in the official capacity of a United Nations employee. So, let's begin the talk. First of all, I'm very grateful. It's a truly humbling experience for me to be here before you today, to be invited in this talk. And it has really given me an opportunity to reflect on my own journey from the lens of self-growth. Even as I was deciding what title to give for this talk, I actually had a change of heart as I reflected further on this theme, seeing the unseen. Initially, when I started thinking about this theme, seeing the unseen, I told the organizers that the title of my talk will be The Pathless Journey to a Meaningful Career. The reason why I thought of this title is because when I look back and reflect on the types of jobs that I've been doing in the past, it doesn't seem to have a feasible path. Traditionally, if you have a legal background like myself, there's a clear path to becoming a judge, to becoming a partner in a law firm, to becoming a civil servant, to becoming an academic, to becoming a prosecutor, and so on and so forth. I didn't follow any of those paths. Instead, I lived in different places around the world. I did different kinds of jobs with different types of institutions. I did some work for the United Nations. I did some work for international courts. I did some work for academic institutions. I did some work even for the media for a short period of time. So this is why I thought, this title, The Pathless Journey to a Meaningful Career, seems to be a good title. However, after I reflected further on the matter, as I was having coffee with my friend in the cafe in front of my house, we were discussing this, and actually my wise friend of mine pointed out something to me that perhaps I need to reflect further on this matter. Maybe I have overlooked something. And as I reflected further on the matter and I went deeper into myself to see the unseen, I actually realized that while this journey has not been feasible, you cannot see it, there's no feasible path, but underneath, there's actually a consistent theme that creates an invisible path throughout the journey of my professional life. And in that moment, I actually saw the unseen in a very different clarity and understanding. So therefore, I decided to call the organizers and say, listen, changing my theme, changing my title. It should be The Invisible Path to a Meaningful Career. Today, I changed my mind again. This is what happens when you go deeper into yourself and you start reflecting. when the visible is trying to see the invisible, you change your mind. And that's not a bad thing. So today, I decided to talk about the relationship between the visible and the invisible in experiencing a meaningful and purposeful professional life. As I look back through my journey, I see that sometimes the visible and the invisible align, sometimes they didn't. When the visible and invisible align, there's harmony, I feel contentment, I feel at peace. But when it's not aligned, I feel separation, I feel anxiety, sometimes I feel conflict, sometimes you suffer. Why is that? I think it has something to do with the relationship that I have with my inner self. I realized that all this time, there's actually been a much wiser, a much knowledgeable, invisible me that has been guiding me all this time. And it's accessible within myself if I want to access it. Some people call this inner senses. Some people call this intuition. For the sake of this talk, let's call it inner voice. The inner voice is your true, authentic voice. It is the voice that guides you to truly express the most honest and authentic expression of yourself. But sometimes you can't hear the voice. It's there, but you can't hear it. Why is that? Because there's a lot of noises. There's a lot of noises in your head. I acted against this inner voice when I decided to major in science and maths instead of humanities. Although I hated math, I hated physics in high school, and I decided to do it anyway. I went against this voice when I decided to intern in a law firm, even though I wasn't interested in corporate law or anything like that. And I suffered. But why did I do that? Because the table of pros and cons that I make in my mind, with all the list of things, confirmed that that was a good idea. This was the rational way to go. And all the people, the wise advisors surrounding me, they all said it was a good idea. But I suffered. Why? Because I listened to the noise instead of the voice. Now you will see there's a lot of people surrounding you who will give you advice about how to strategize into a successful career. The do's and don'ts. 10 steps into achieving the career of your dreams. Now, they might be right. If your idea of a successful career is motivated by the need for physical survival, for example, financial independence, the need to provide for your family, or if it's only motivated by the desire for status and recognition. The advice that you will get from these people are based on their own experiences and based on their own fears and insecurities. Now, their advice will not be helpful or relevant to you if your idea of success is motivated by a deeper desire of meaning and purpose. And when you start giving attention to these opinions and advice, the voice gets louder and louder, and you start believing them. And then it gets so noisy, and then it gets more difficult to actually listen to your inner voice. I remember the opinion of others when I was considering making decisions about my career. Theater? Theater is not a career. It's a hobby. Communications? That is a skill. You don't study that in university. You've taken an interest in human rights, have you? So you plan to live with your mother forever. Another unpaid internship? Who's going to pay for that? When are you going to get a real job? Your friend seems to be doing very well, you know? She's working in a very prestigious law firm. She's earning good money, and she has a stable job. Don't you want to be like her? So when are you going to do your PhD? And my favorite one, happiness is overrated. You just have to work hard like a horse. We all did it. So when you see these opinions coming towards you, it's coming, you see it, it's about to get into your head, just stop. One of my favorite poet, a Persian poet from the 13th century called Jalaluddin Rumi, says, "Be silent and listen. The inspiration you seek is already within you." These words point to the wisdom that only in silence can you truly hear what you need to hear. Only when you close your eyes can you truly see what you need to see. Looking back from where I'm standing now, there has been a few examples where the visible and the invisible aligned, where I felt that the work that I did was meaningful and purposeful, where I felt that I was guided by some invisible force to make the decisions that I made. I was guided by this inner force when, instead of attending courses for the preparation of a university entry exam, I decided to work in an international news agency, being a freelance assistant reporter. During one of the most historical periods in Indonesia, it was the transition between 30 years of dictatorship to democracy. It was the first time that Indonesia had a real election where they actually can choose their own representatives. It was the time when it was the East Timor referendum, where the East Timorese people were to decide their fate on whether or not to stay or leave Indonesia. We went and covered press conferences. We covered different kinds of stories. We covered riots and unrest. It was very exciting. I got a chance to speak with different kinds of people. The politicians, the change makers, the observers, the ordinary people, and those who suffer and face injustice. And I got to be a part of telling their story. And that felt very meaningful to me. I was guided by this voice when I ended up getting involved with the United Nations Development Program for their access to justice and legal empowerment projects, where I was part of a team that went through remote areas in different 5 provinces in Indonesia, where we tried to identify the poor, marginalized, and vulnerable groups in each communities in terms of their abilities to access their basic rights. So these are people who are limited in their socioeconomic status. These are people who are marginalized because of poverty or lack of education. These are people who face fear, intimidation, and discrimination when they're trying to access their rights. I was part of a team that helped identify the key issues that they were facing in terms of access to justice. These were issues relating to public services, gender-based issues, land right issues, and issues relating to post-conflict. I was also part of a team that continued in the project's implementation phase, where I connected with civil society organizations and provide assistance where needed to design specific projects for specific communities in order to address the issues that they face, the rights issues that they face. For example, some of the programs that we discussed were provision of the establishment of a pro bono legal clinic, or the establishment of shelter for battered women, the establishment of a domestic violence legal information center, the training of women paralegals in designated villages so that they can serve as a vocal point for women issues in their villages. The facilitation of village-level meetings, radio dialogues, film viewings on specific rights for specific vulnerable groups such as farmers, fisher persons, mine workers, on how to protect themselves from illegal practices, from dangerous practices, and how to access remedies for their grievances. This work felt meaningful to me because I had the opportunity to listen to these people, to share their story whenever I can, and to be part of helping them help themselves raise their own voice. I was guided by this voice when I ended up working in various international courts, where I assisted judges in drafting judgments and decisions involving grave crimes that were committed in the former Yugoslavia and the genocide that happened in Rwanda. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about the background of the former Yugoslavia. During the conflict in the former Yugoslavia, there were massacres, there were expulsions of populations, there was systematic rape, there was the use of torture and inhumane acts. Throughout the conflict in Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, and Kosovo. During the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina itself, from 1992 to 1995, it was estimated that 100,000 people were killed, 2 million people were displaced, and this is half of the population, and thousands of Bosnian women were raped. One of the worst atrocities happened during a few days in a town called Srebrenica, where 8,000 Bosnian Muslim boys and men were executed by Serbian forces. In Rwanda in 1994, over approximately 100 days, up to 1 million people belonging to the Tutsi ethnic group were massacred by those belonging to the Hutu ethnic group. An estimated 100,000 to 250,000 women were systematically raped. People seeking refuge in churches and schools were killed. People were killed in their own homes, sometimes by their neighbors. Family members were forced to kill each other or commit inhuman acts against each other. Babies and children were slaughtered in ways that you cannot imagine because they belong to the wrong ethnic group. While the core function of the tribunal is to hold those individuals responsible for their crimes, it also has served the function of creating facts, establishing facts, and creating a historical record of what happened during these times. It has also tried to bring justice to the victims and survivors of these crimes and try to give them a voice. through their testimonies. It feels meaningful to me to be part of this process. Reflecting on these experiences, it has made me realize that even though I haven't always listened to my inner voice, even though as I was making all these decisions, I wasn't fully aware of my true motivations, there's always this invisible force that's always been there, that's always been guiding me. Through my inner voice, from one unknown step to another, creating a common thread, an invisible thread, and connecting me to those who are invisible so that I can help give them a voice. So this is my advice to you. Pay attention to your inner voice. The inner voice that is guiding you to the harmony between the invisible and the visible, to allow you to manifest the invisible into reality, to express your truest, most authentic expression of yourself in your own unique ways. I shall end this talk with another quote from Rumi. Everyone sees the unseen in the proportion of the clarity of their hearts. And that depends on how much he has polished it. Whoever has polished it more sees more. More unseen forms become manifest to him. Thank you.